All right, so we are now recording. Again, if you do have any questions as we go through here, please use the chat functionality within Teams here, and I will get to that. I will be stopping throughout the session here as we go through for any questions. I'll give some time and things like that as we go through here. So once again, if you do not have the manual, if you go over to the chat, the manual is available there. You should be able to grab it and download it from the chat area. I will be following along with the manual here. Obviously, not reading through it and everything like that, but we'll be using it as a guide as we go through here. So a couple of housekeeping items. Again, if you do need CPE, make sure you answer all the questions. Everybody is put on mute, so please use the chat, and we will be stopping along the lines here for questions. So let's jump in here. We are going to be going through the year-end processes for all the different modules that are that need a year-end close within Dynamics GP. I'm using the 18.6 version, which is the latest version of GP that's out there. I'll point out there's one or two things that are available in 18.6 that are not available in prior releases. I will point them up as we get there. Nothing big, nothing major or anything like that. So, you know, it's you'll be able to follow along as we go through here. So with that, a couple of the things to note here. Again, I'm going in the manual over on page 5 of the manual here. So Microsoft has released the 2023 year-end update. Just a couple little things in there. No major releases or anything like that, or no major advances in there. With the October 18.6 release, GP does now print out all of the boxes around all of the 1099s. Excuse me, in the past, it was only the 1099 NEC that they did last year, but they've added the boxes around all of the forms there. Also note that IRS has changed their rules around 1099s this year. If you are required to send out more than 10 1099s, they are requiring you to magnetic filing with them. The Dynamics GP does not do magnetic media filing. So if you do need to do that, there are ways to do that through the IRS themselves, or there are also some third parties that can do that as well. So just a couple little things there. So let's get into the actual year-end close. So when to close and the order of closing the modules. So again, we have many different modules within GP. Some of the modules, such as inventory and fixed assets, should be closed at the end of the fiscal year before posting any transactions in the next fiscal year. Within those modules, some other people in here. Again, with the fixed assets and inventory modules, the dates that the transactions were completed are not used in determining if they are part of the close. Rather, the closing process will include anything that is posted since the last close was completed. So all that means is that what you want to do is you want to make sure that if you are utilizing the inventory or fixed assets modules, you do go through and close those before posting anything in for 2024. It has to do with the year-to-date reporting and things like that. So, excuse me for 1 second here. All right, I had a little tickle in my throat there. With regards to receivables and payables, again, it's a good idea to go through and close those prior to posting anything for the next year, but it's not as imperative because those modules do use the actual posting dates for the majority of their reports. There are a couple of reports in there that go based upon, since last closed and things like that. Those might be a little bit off if you do not close those modules prior to entering in anything for 2024. But those inquiries are really not used all that often. So again, it's not as imperative as that they get closed prior to that. Also, there are scripts that can be run if you do go through and post some things in receivables and payables, and we can help you out with those scripts as well. Also, there's no year-end processing for sales order or purchase order. They come in under receivables and payables modules. And then again, here's the suggested close order. So payroll. And again, this is going to be dependent upon your calendar, whether you're on a calendar year end or a fiscal year end. Obviously, if you're on a fiscal year end, you're going to want to do these closes at your fiscal year end. Payroll is always done at the calendar year because those are dealing with the W-2 numbers and things like that. So payroll, you'll always do it the calendar year. Inventory is a fiscal. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Something stuck in my throat here. Inventory is going to be on your fiscal year end. Receivables, there are both fiscal and calendar year end closes for that. Payables as well, fiscal and calendar year. Fixed assets is a fiscal year end. Analytical accounting is a fiscal year end, and GL is a fiscal. The analytical accounting is actually part of the GL close there. So we're going to go, those kind of happen at the same time there. That's why they're both on the fiscal year end. So we're going to go through and we're going to walk through these different modules here. Again, the typical processing here would be, payroll at it's independent. It can be done prior to any of the other modules. It just needs to always be done at the end of the calendar year. But the other modules, typically, we'd look at inventory, receivables, payables, then fixed assets, and then general ledger. For the purposes of this session, we're going to go a little bit out of order there. I'm going to put payroll and fixed assets at the very end after general ledger, only because I know not as many people utilized fixed assets and payroll. So I'm going to put those at the very end. So if you don't use either of those modules and you don't want to hang around, you're more than welcome to hang around. But if you don't want to hang around, you can just drop off after the GL. So again, payroll and fixed assets will cover at the very end there. So the first module we're going to talk about is the inventory year-end closing. But before I do that, I do want to go ahead and launch our first poll here so that I make sure we are in compliance with the CPE stuff. So again, these are going to be very, very easy questions. 99% of them are yes, no, and stuff like that. So if you can, please go ahead and record your answer here. Do you need CPE for this session? Yes or no? And then go ahead and submit the button. Once we get through and I have about 80 to 90% of the responses here, we'll go ahead and close that out. Um, so again, please go ahead and do those responses there. And as we go through here, what we will do is we will go ahead and do a countdown so that we make sure that we have everybody, everybody has the ability to answer if they need it. So we're going to go ahead and close this out. Looks like we've got just about everybody there. Again, we'll go ahead and do the 10-second countdown here, just to give everybody the last moment chance here. So again, do you need CP credits for this session? Yes or no? And we'll go ahead and do a 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll go ahead and close out that poll. So again, thank you everyone for answering that. We'll have these polls pop up every now and then throughout the session here. So getting back into our first module. The first module we're going to talk about, again, is the inventory year-end close. Actually, before I do that, I did want to just stop and check on the chat, see if there is any questions in here so far. Again, if you do have questions, go ahead and put those in here. There's a question in here. If you were currently on 2018 year-end. So there's a question on if you load up the year-end update that was just put out back in November, will that take you to version 18.6? And yes, that will take you. The year-end updates are cumulative, meaning they will always take you to the last version of the product there. And then another question was, were we supposed to be seeing any slides? No, we're just going to be walking through the Dynamics GP session itself here. So again, if you are looking for the manual, I did put the manual earlier in the chat, so you may have to scroll up in the chat to see it, but it should be out there, and you should be able to follow along in that manual there. All right. All right, so we'll go ahead and continue on. So once again, we're going to go back to our inventory year-end closing checklist. So inventory, there's not a whole lot of, well, actually within all the modules, there's really not a lot to the year-end processes. And what we've kind of done with our manual here is we go through, we have the summary steps and then the detail steps. So we kind of just talk through what the steps are going to be. And then we'll go through and we'll take a look at each of those steps as they are. And we'll walk through the detailed steps in the GP system so you can see exactly how to do that. But essentially what the year-end close for inventory does is it transfers all your summarized current year quantity, cost, and sales amounts to transaction histories. Again, you know, if you've ever taken a training course with me or anybody from PTC, we've always stressed to make sure that you are tracking history for you know, vendors, customers, items, everything like that. Again, because when you do go through and you do these year-end updates, it moves things to histories. And if you're not tracking that history, you know, you may lose some of that information. So again, want to make sure you're tracking the history for that. And then again, part of this year-end closing will also update each item's beginning quantity to the quantity on hand at each site. So again, you know, it just does a couple things there. It moves some stuff to history, and then it will update the beginning quantity of your quantity on hand. So what are the steps to go through in order to close out inventory? Well, the first thing we're going to do is basically, this is going to be common for all the modules here. We're going to want to make sure that we post all the transactions for the year. Again, inventory and fixed assets, those two modules you want to make sure you do before you post anything for the next year. In our case here, it would be 2024. So you want to make sure that you have posted everything for 2023 before you go through and do the year-end process. Step 2 there is going to be reconcile the inventory quantities. Step 3, complete a physical inventory count and post any adjustments. Step 4 are going to be print any additional reports. We'll talk about it, some of those reports may be. Step 5 is going to be make a backup. As you will see throughout our session here, we are very big on multiple backups throughout the process, so that we have backup before each module and after each module is done, just to make sure that if there's anything that goes wrong, we can always roll back to that backup there. So again, step 5, make a backup. Step 6, we're going to set this GP system date to 12/31/2023. We'll talk about how to do that. Then we'll go ahead and close the year. And then step 8 is an optional, and this will be optional for most of the modules in the system here, which would be to go in and close the fiscal periods for the inventory series. Now, some of you may be closing out each individual fiscal period already. Some people just leave them open the entire time, so that's why it's an optional step, whether or not you want to go through and close off those fiscal periods. And then step 9 is make a backup. All right, so our detailed steps here. Again, we're going to want to make sure the first step here is to make sure we're posting all transactions for the year. So again, you're going to want to make sure that not only your inventory transactions, but anything that is going to affect your inventory. So that would be any of your invoicing, sales order processing, inventory, as well as purchase order receipts and transactions. You want to make sure all of those for 2023 have been posted. Again, the inventory is not one of those ones that goes specifically based upon date for the closing processes or for the numbers in there. So if you do post anything for 2024 that slips there before you do the year end, those are going to be included in that year end close. So again, we want to just make sure we have everything there for 2023. All right. If there are items that you might have in a batch sitting out there that are for 2024, and you want to make sure that those don't get posted, you probably, what you want to do is maybe set up a new batch called 2024 or something like that. Move those transactions into that new batch so that you can go through and just post the batches that you have sitting out there that have the 2023 transactions and not have to worry about that. You don't have to go through and delete any of those transactions that are out there for 2024. You just want to make sure that they are not posted. So again, you can have unposted transactions while you're going through and doing the year-end processes. So it's not like if you have anything for 2024, you have to delete them and re-enter them. No, that's not the case. You can leave them out there. You just want to make sure that you're not posting them prior to going through and doing your year-end close. Okay. Step 2, reconcile the inventory quantities. So many of you may be doing this on a monthly, quarterly, or semi-annually basis, but it's a good idea to go through and do this at least at the year end, going through and reconciling your inventory quantities. So to go through and do an inventory reconciliation, you're going to go under Microsoft Dynamics GP, Tools, Utilities. Again, we're in our inventory session here, so then we would go into our reconcile. Now, when you pull up this reconcile inventory quantities here, you can either do all or you can do a range of items. Again, because we're doing this at year end, we're probably going to want to do all of them just to make sure that if there are any discrepancies out there between the detail and the summary and things like that, or if there were any hiccups during posting and something didn't go all the way through, the reconcile inventory quantities will go through and take a look at those quantities that are sitting out there in different tables and make sure that they all match there. Okay. So again, we would go ahead and process this. I'm just going to do a couple of items here. I'm not going to run everything, just so you can see how this works here. So again, typically you would leave this as all and go through and do that, but just for time's sake, I'm just going to go ahead and process just a couple of them. You are going to get there will be an inventory reconciliation report that is available. Obviously, you're probably going to want to print that out to the printer. I'm just going to do mine up to the screen here. Again, if it's up to the screen and there is anything out there, you can print it to a printer from there. So I'll just go ahead and do mine to the screen. There's actually a couple different reports here. I have pick list reports and things like that as well. So it's going to go through and it's going to run through the process here. Again, mine should go pretty quick here because I only selected a couple of items. And hopefully I don't have any issues there. Okay, well, look, see, so I do have. So this is the type of inventory reconciliation report here. You'll get, so I have a couple of different items here. It's going to tell you the different sites over here. So if you have multiple sites set up in GP, it will tell you the item number, the description, and the site that it has. And then here's the error message. So the allocated quantity has been adjusted from 0 to 2. And it looks like it's just the allocated quantity for each of these. So in essence, what this is telling me is there are some sales order processing transactions that are sitting out there, and it's gone through and it's allocated the item quantities for me on those. So from here, I would probably go ahead and print this out and maybe save this off to a PDF even for historical purposes, just to make sure that I have that for reference if I need it. Again, my second report here has to do with manufacturing. And then here's, again, another manufacturing for pick list. So again, those are the different reports there that you're going to see. Now, in the manual, we do talk about on page 7 and 8 here, it talks about if you do run that report and there are any discrepancies in serial or lot numbers, there is a way that you can go through and edit those serial and lot numbers. You can use the item transaction entry window to go through and correct those amounts or numbers if you need to. So again, that would be if there are any serial or lot number adjustments that were noted on the on your report. All right. Moving on to step 3 here. The step 3 would be to complete a physical inventory account and post any adjustments. All right, so there's a couple of different ways of going through and doing physical inventories within GP. You can use the cycle counts, you can use different methods in here, but essentially what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you run your inventory activity reports, and then go through and do your physical count. Make sure that that matches up to your quantity on hand. If there are any adjustments needed, again, if you're doing the physical counts through GP, you'll be able to post those transactions right through there. If you're doing it outside of GP, maybe you're just running a list and going and counting and marking things out on a list, then you can just go through and do item transactions to either increase or decrease the values to match what you have on hand. Again, you're going to want to make sure that you post those transactions because again, they're going to be part of your year-end process. And you want to make sure that you want to post those with a, a 2023 date on them. All right. So again, you can, if you're using the stock count entry window, you'll get that as part of your processes there. If not, then you could go right into, transactions inventory, transaction entry, and go ahead and do your adjustments right through here as well. All right. Step 4 for our inventory processes are going to be to print any additional reports that you want. These would be for your permanent records. So again, a lot of times people will print these off to PDF, print them up to the screen, make sure that they're what they want, and then go ahead and print them off to a PDF. Some of the reports that we see people run would be your stock status report, your purchase receipts report, a turnover report, the transaction history report, serial number list, and lot number listing if you're using, or serial or lot number listing if you're using any if you are tracking either of those. And then you're going to want to go through and again make sure that you are saving those off as part of your permanent records. Once you have the reports printed, the next step there, and step number 5 would be to make a backup. Again, this is just going to make sure that you have a good backup prior to going through and actually running the year-end process. So making a backup, there's a couple different ways that can be done. There's the ability to do it directly through GP, or most people will do it through the SQL Server Manager and run a full SQL backup on their database. Okay. So once we have a backup, the next step here is going to be to change our system date to 12/31/2023. All right, and again, if you're seeing my screen here down in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see my system date right now is 4/12/2027. I'm using the sample Fabricam company, and that's what the date is there. But what you would do is you would go ahead and click on whatever the date says in the corner for you, and then go ahead and make sure that that says 12/31/2023. All right. Once we have that done, we are actually now ready to go through and run the year-end closing process. So when we close the year, it accomplishes a number of different tasks. What it will do is it will take all the summarized current year quantity, cost, and sales amounts and move those to history. It will update the items beginning quantity to the quantity on hand at each site. It will zero out the quantities sold for each site, because again, we're starting a new year, so the quantity sold will then become 0 for that new year. It removes purchase receipts for items that have been completely sold and removes cost change history prior to the date you specify. We'll take a look at that when we go through and do our year-end process there. You can remove any discontinued items from the item records that have completely been sold. So again, under your inventory items, one of the item types there is discontinued. So if you mark anything as discontinued, you can go ahead and remove those. You can also remove any lot attributes from the records of lot numbers if they've been completely sold. And finally, it'll update the standard cost of each item to the current cost if you're using either the FIFO periodic or LIFO periodic valuation methods. All right, so to go through and do the year-end close, again, we're going to go into our inventory system here. And under our routines, you'll see year-end close. So we're going to go ahead and do our year-end close. And again, here is where we have those options to remove the discontinued items, the attributes for any lots that have completely been sold, and sold receipts, and removing the sold receipts and changing and the cost change history prior to. This is where we can go in and enter in a date. Maybe we entered in a year ago, or a couple of years ago, if we want to kind of reduce some of the history that's out there for the sold receipts and cost change. Now, you do not have to do any of these. And we have a lot of clients who don't do any of these. They'll just leave that information in there in perpetuity. So Again, you don't have to do that. The final one here is to update the item standard cost. Again, that would be if you're using LIFO periodic, either FIFO or LIFO periodic, then you can update the item standard cost in there as well. Right. So once you do that, actually on page 10 here, it gives you a lot more detail about each of those different options there and what they mean and what they do. So you can go ahead and take a look at that the manual there and see if there's any questions on that. So I'm going to go ahead and process that. Update standard costs. I'll go ahead and unmark that. So we're going to go ahead and run this. Again, I don't have a whole lot of stuff out there, so it'll go ahead and it'll be pretty quick there for me. Right. So as you note there, there's no year-end report or anything like that. It's done. Right. So it just went through and did it that quickly. So the next step here, step 8, again, is the optional report of closing the fiscal periods for the inventory series. Again, many of you may be doing this or may not be doing this as you go through. So again, if we go under GP Tools, Setup, Company, Fiscal Periods, this is where we would go through and say that for all of our inventory series is closed here. I tend to leave all mine open, but again, you would because we've now just gone through and done the year-end inventory, we could go ahead and close off that inventory. Right. And then step 9, again, go through and make that backup, that final backup that says, okay, we just closed the inventory system. And so now we're going to make a backup so that we have a good backup after that inventory process has been done. All right. Couple tips here. Again, the year-end close must be done before any transactions for the new year have been posted. Therefore, it's best to do this year-end close either on the last day or very, very close to the last day of your fiscal or calendar year. You have those options of marking those boxes, and then again, if you mark the update item standard cost for any items that have been assigned the LIFO or FIFO periodic valuation method will be adjusted to reflect each item's current cost, which is the most recent cost that you paid for that. Right. Couple year-end FAQs here that you can go through. I'm not going to read those, but I will pause here and see if there are any questions. Anything out here in the chat, and I'm not seeing anything. All right, let's go ahead and throw up our second poll here. All right, so our second poll here, we'll go ahead and launch that. Have you personally done any year-end processes within your organization previously? Yes or no, and then go ahead and submit that. Again, we'll give people a minute or two here to respond to that. And then before we close it out, we will go ahead and do the 10-second countdown just to make sure everybody has the ability to answer. Again, if they need the CP credits. All right, so it looks like we've got most people. We've got a couple more to go here. All right, so we'll go ahead and give it the 10-second countdown. So again, you'll have 10 seconds to answer this poll, and then we're going to go ahead and close out that poll. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you. We're going to go ahead and close out that question. And again, it looks like it's about 2/3 or so in terms of people that have actually done the year-end close. So that's a good amount there. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that poll out there, and we'll get back to we'll just make sure, see if there's any additional questions here before we run into our next module. And our next module that we're going to talk about is going to be, I believe, our receivables. Let's just see. Yep, receivables management is going to be next. So any last questions here before we jump into that? All right. Very good. Not seeing any. So we'll go ahead and jump into our receivables management. All right. So within receivables, unlike inventory, so inventory only has your fiscal year end close. So again, there's only one process that needs to be done for that. With receivables and you'll see in payables as well, there's actually calendar year and fiscal year closes. So if you are on a calendar year, you can do both at the same time there. It's not like you have to go through two different processes or anything like that. But if you are on a fiscal year, meaning that your year end does not end on December 31st, then you do have the ability to go through and to do two different processes. And we'll talk about why there are those different processes there. So again, with receivables and payables, there are calendar year and fiscal year processes. So the calendar year, that clears the calendar year to date finance charges and moves them to the last year field on the customer records. If the calendar year, if the calendar year and fiscal year are the same, you can go through and do those two processes at once. You don't have to do both. You don't have to do them individually. So closing the fiscal year, that transfers all the amounts other than the finance charges to last year. All right. So, and that procedure should be performed before beginning posting transactions to the fiscal year. Again, with payables and receivables, it's a little less important that's done right at the end of the year prior to posting anything to the next year. There's only a couple of views, inquiries that are since last close. So those since last close views would be incorrect if you've posted anything for 2024 prior to 2023, closing 2023. But again, those are not used all that often, to be honest with you. So, we have a lot of clients who, don't really worry about that too much. And again, there are some scripts and things like that that can be used if you absolutely do need those or do want to see those amounts adjusted there. So again, on page 13 of the manual there, there's a note there, the calendar year view and the fiscal year view on the customer summary window will not change since they're date sensitive on a real-time basis. Documents categories here by year and period as they are entered in the system on a real-time basis. As such, there's not a year-end close procedure for these views. The year-end close procedure only affects the amounts since last close. Okay, so again, hopefully everybody is following me along with what we say there. So the view there on page 13 is you'll see the summary view, amounts since last close. So again, if you're looking at that may not match exactly the year-to-date numbers and things like that, because there may have been some transactions that have been posted, after or before the year-end close. But if you're looking at the standard year-to-date numbers and standard year-to-date inquiries for receivables, those are date sensitive, so it doesn't matter when you go through and do your year-end close for those types of transactions there. All right, so again, we have our summary and detailed checklists. So talking about the summary checklist here, we're going to post all the transactions for the calendar year and complete the month-end procedures. Again, just like we talked about in inventory, and we're going to talk about with every other module, we want to make sure that we're going through and posting as much as we can. And if there are any month-end procedures that you would normally go through, so for receivables, you might have running statements, doing finance charges, those types of things. You want to make sure that you've done those prior to running the year-end close. Step 2 is going to make a backup. Step 3 is going to be set the system date, as we talked about before. Step 4 is going to be close the calendar year using the window. Again, we'll take a look at and see that there are actual 2 things that you can do there, the fiscal and calendar year. Step 5 is, again, closing those fiscal periods like we did in inventory. Again, that's an optional type thing there. Step 6 is actually going to be another optional type thing, which is our closing of the sales tax periods. Now, let's pause here for a second and talk about sales tax. So if you are dealing with sales tax within the system, and you are actually tracking sales tax in receivables and payables, you do not want to do the closed sales tax piece. You want to do that with the last module that you're doing. Okay, so let me say that a little bit different here. So right now we are closing out our receivables, but we have not closed out payables yet. So we don't want to do our sales tax close until after we do our payables, if that's going to be the second one. The reason being is that those sales tax tables are actually used by both modules. You only set up the sales, you can go through and set up sales tax once, and it can be used by both modules for both receivables and payables. So again, you want to go through and do that sales tax close with the last module that you are closing, whether that be receivables or payables. So if you're doing payables first, then do the sales tax close with receivables. If you're doing receivables first, then do the sales tax close with payables. All right. So that was step 6. Step 7 is going to be make a backup. All right. So let's go through and walk through our steps here in a detailed manner. So again, the first one here is going to be post all our transactions for the fiscal year. So again, we're going to go into our sales area here, and we would probably go down to our series post here and make sure that we don't have anything that's sitting out here for 2023. Again, you can leave 2024 transactions out there and not post them. So you can have unposted transactions as you're going through this, but you want to make sure you go through and post all of your 2023 transactions, or at least as many as you possibly can there. All right, so again, that was under transactions, our series post. This will just show you that everything that's out there. Now, again, we're talking about sales series, so we are talking about our sales order processing, our invoicing, and our receivables. So there's actually those 3 areas that you'd want to look at in order to make sure that you have everything posted. All right, step 2 is going to be make a backup. Again, you're going to hear me. I'm going to be a broken record about this, going through and making a backup prior to doing the year-end close. Step 3, again, we go down to our date here and make sure that the date is set to be 12/31/2023. And then we go through and we do the year-end close. So again, to do the year-end close, we're going to go ahead and go into our routines and year-end close here. And that will bring up our year-end close window. Again, remember we talked about fiscal and calendar. So if you are doing this, if you are in a calendar year or a fiscal year end in June, and you're doing just your fiscal year end, then you can go ahead and mark that. If you are a calendar year end, you can just go ahead and mark all and then go through and do that. There is a year-end report that you can get out if you want to get that. Again, it's suggested that you go ahead and print that report and then save that report off as part of your company permanent records. Again, auditors, if you're under audit or anything like that, they like to sometimes take a look at those year-end reports. So once you've done that, you would go ahead and hit process. I'm actually not going to hit process on this one here just because, again, I'm in my sample company and I don't want to mess anything up there. But you would go ahead and hit process. When it is done, you would, if you had that mark, the report box marked, you would get out your report. And that report is just going to show you, what has been moved by company or by customer, what has been moved to previous year. All right. Step 5, again, is going to be going in and closing out the fiscal periods. So again, just coming in and marking all of the different sales periods here closed. Again, that's an optional there. Step 6 is the sales tax periods. Again, we're going to cover this when we get over into payables because we're doing payables second. So we're going to skip that right now. And then step 7, again, make it back up. Right. All right. So if we go ahead and take a look at a couple of the tips here over on page 20. Again, they don't have to absolutely be done before you post anything for 2024. It's suggested, strongly suggested, but it's not as imperative as it is with inventory and fixed assets. So again, there are 2 processes there, the calendar year and the fiscal year. The calendar year just moves the finance charges year to date into last year, whereas the fiscal year goes through and moves essentially everything else other than the year to date charges. So it'll move, sales and payments and all those different types of things there. Okay. When you do, again, if you're doing both at the same time, then it will go through and move all of those transactions to the last year. All right. So let's jump back over to our chat here. And so let's see, I have a question out here. So there's a question out here. If you're on it looks like this individual's on a fiscal year and they did not close out the fiscal year in the past, it's doing a year-end close is not a formal requirement in any of the modules except the general ledger. The general ledger is the one module that you must go through and do year-end close. Well, I guess payroll too if you're running payroll. All of the other modules, they're suggested year-end closes and things like that. If you don't do a year-end close for those other modules, all that the year-end close is really doing is taking the current year amounts and moving them over to last year. So it's not an absolute must that you do those. And it doesn't, if you skip the year and you go through and do it, let's say you skip 2022 and you go in through and do 2023. Again, if you went and ran reports like a The inquiry view for 2023 would also include 2022. But if you actually go through and run any reports, or if you do other inquiry type reports, so there's different inquiries in the system here. So again, if I come in here and I do, like a customer period summary inquiry report, these amounts in here are going to be correct whether or not you've done the year-end close, because these are date sensitive. So for payables and receivables, these amounts here will always be, correct whether or not you've done a year-end close. Where the year-end close kind of throws things off a little bit is if you go in and do like the yearly summary here. So, and here's the year, if you do a summary view amounts since last close, this is going to be what's going to be affected by doing a year-end close. But you could still come into this window here. So I could pull up Aaron Fitz. And so here's my amount since last close. And then if I go through and do my fiscal year, this fiscal year is always going to be correct because these are date sensitive here. Whereas the amounts since last close, this is what gets affected based upon the year-end close. All right. So again, it's not an absolute must that you have to go through and do this. And if you haven't done it in the past and you do it for this year, again, that's fine. It is strong, it is suggested that you do these year-end closes as you go through and get to the end of the year and things like that. But again, for payables, receivables, and things like that, it's not as drop dead important. Now, when we get into our general ledger, again, we're gonna, that's a whole different ball of wax. We really need to do that in order to be able to run financials and things like that for the following year. So. So I forget. Let me get back here. I forget what the actual question was. Should this be something to think about for the future? Yes, I would actually. I would suggest going through and doing that at any point in time. There again, you could just go through and do a calendar year-end close, and that would be fine as well. So. Again, it's really only those couple of inquiry views that get skewed. All right. There's a question here about providing the steps. Yeah, that is in the manual that was mailed out, and it's also the manual is also included in the chat here. So if you scroll back up in the meeting chat, the manual is available up there as well. So, right, hopefully everybody was able to do that there. All right, let's go ahead and let's launch our next poll. So we're going to go through and do our poll number 3 here. So poll 3 is, do you run fixed assets through Microsoft Dynamics GP? I probably should have put another one in here. Do you know that you can run fixed assets through Dynamics GP? But yeah, so if you can go ahead and answer the poll there. Again, we'll give individuals a chance here to answer that. Make sure that they're answering it as needed. Right, we're getting there. We're getting pretty close. Again, we'll give the 10-second countdown to make sure everybody has the opportunity to answer those. Surprisingly, it looks like it's about 2/3 of you who do not run fixed assets through GP. Wondering how many of those is because you don't know that you had fixed assets, or if you're using an outside system, or maybe you just don't feel that you have enough assets to really worry about it. But again, we'll talk about fixed assets later on and closing out that. But fixed assets is a handy module within GP. So, all right, we've got most people here. There's a few that have not answered it, but we'll go ahead and do the 10-second countdown. So we'll give 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we're going to go ahead and close that out. Okay, and we will close that poll and move on. So, all right, let's see. We'll go back here to the chat and see if there's any questions here. So, yeah, if Marilyn, if you just scroll all the way up to the top, you should be able to see the manual in there. I can also resend it to you at the end, but you should be able to see the manual all the way up at the top of the chat. All right. Any other questions on receivables here before we move on? All right. All right, not seeing any other questions. Let's go ahead and move on to our payables then. All right, so payables is going to essentially mirror our receivables. As I mentioned with receivables, there's a calendar and a fiscal year end. Same with payables, calendar and fiscal year end. And then again, the sales tax functionality there. If you haven't already closed it out, you're gonna do that as part of the year end close for payables. All right. So for our checklist, we're going to make sure that step 1, post all of our transactions again. Step 2, make a backup. Step 3, set the date. Step 4, close it using the year-end closing window. Step 5, close the sales tax periods that we talked about there. Step 6 would be to go through and close out the fiscal periods, which I see that it looks like so we forgot to include that. Maybe just make a note there to include that on my steps and close. Okay. All right. So make a step back up, and then you're able to print 1099 statements at any time after all the payables checks with dates in 2023 have been printed and posted. So essentially what that means is you can do the 1099s before or after you do your year-end close. Again, those are going to be date sensitive, so that information is going to be there and available for you to go through and do that. All right. All right, so let's walk through those individual steps here. So the first one here, again, is going to be post all the transactions. So again, if we're in purchasing, under our transactions, down the bottom there where we have our series post, where we can go through and take a look at any transactions that are out there. Again, we're going to want to make sure that we are posting both our payables and our purchase order processing transactions. So if we have any receivings or invoice matchings or anything like that, we're going to want to make sure that those also get posted and so that they hit our vendor accounts as well. Again, you can leave transactions that are, for 2024, you can leave them unposted out there as we go through and do this. Also, we forgot to mention this on receivables, but it's for receivables and payables. It's always recommended that you print out any trial balance there and put that as part of your formal records. And again, if you want to run any audit trail reports or anything like that, you could go ahead and do those before you do the year-end close as well. All right. So again, posting all of our batches. Step 2 is going to be make the backup. Step 3 is going to be set that system date. Again, down in the bottom down here, we go through, click on the date, set the date. And then we're going to go through and close the year using the year-end window. So we're going to come over to our routines and go into our year-end close. And just like we saw in receivables, you have the all. So we can go through and either do fiscal, calendar, or all. And again, we do have that report as well that we can go through and print out. And it's suggested that you go through, print that out, save that off as a PDF, and keep it as part of your permanent records there. All right. Again, I'm not going to go ahead and run that actual process there just for time's sake. But again, once you do that, you'll get that report, and then we can come back, go into our setup company fiscal periods, mark off our purchasing series, and then do our final backup. All right. Now, one thing that's different in purchasing than in receivables is in purchasing, we do have the ability to do 1099s. So, as part of the year-end close, or, maybe not as part of the year-end close, but after the year-end close, you may do this sometime in the middle of January or something like that, go through and do your 1099s. It can be part of the full year-end close, but you don't have to. Again, so we're going to come in and do our 1099s. Couple things that are different. We talked about at the top of the session here. All the 1099s now will print with lines. There's no need to to buy any pre-printed forms. All right, and that's in the 18.6 release. 18.5 release had the boxes for the NEC forms. So again, if you're on 18.5, you'll have the boxes for at least the NEC forms. If you need the boxes for any of the other forms, the INTs or divs or anything like that, or miscellaneouses, and you want those boxes, you would need to go up to the 18.6 release. All right. There is one important note there on page 27 of the manual there. If you did, because of the not having all the boxes and things like that, and people using pre-printed forms in the past, they may have gone through and modified the form to align the numbers and things like that. If you've done that in the past, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go in and make sure you unmark the security to that modified form so that you're using the original GP form. That will give you the 1099 form with the boxes. All right. Again, just a reminder to send out the 1099s by the end of January. Again, we talked about this a little bit earlier on, that the limit has now been lowered to 10 from the IRS to send them electronically. Again, GP does not have the ability to do electronically filed 1099 forms. You can do that for free through the IRS website. And then there are also additional ISVs that will handle that as well. So if you need any help with that, contact the sales department and we can help you out with that. And if you do want to do that, I would suggest, if you are looking to add that functionality, I would suggest getting on that sooner rather than later, because right at the end of the year, there's usually a big push to do that, and it can get busy. We had some people wait until the end of January last year, and they were, right up until the last minute to get the 1099s out. So please don't wait until the very last moment there. All right. So the items there talks about the setting up the vendors for 1099 purposes, and then kind of going through and updating the information. Now, there is the ability, if you did forget to mark vendors as 1099able, and you did it sometime throughout the year, there is a utility that you can go through and that will update the transactions. So if we go through our utilities here, under purchasing utilities, there is update 1099 information here. So you can either update the vendor, the 1099 transactions, or the vendor and 1099 transactions. So here again, we can say that we're going to take this from all of them and make them non-employee comps. Again, this would only do it for vendors that are marked as 1099 vendors. So if we say do it for all vendors, it's not going to do it for any vendor who is not marked as 1099 vendors in their vendor master setup. So just to make sure everybody knows where we're talking about, there is under our cards vendor. If we go to cards vendor and we pull up a vendor, we go under our options. Right over here is where we can say whether the tax type here, whether it's not a 1099 vendor or if it is a any of these individual 1099 vendors here. Okay. Now, there are certain circumstances where a vendor may be may get multiple 1099s. That's fine. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure you mark them as one of the 1099able types in here. And then when you actually do the transaction, you can indicate which type of 1099 transaction it is for. So again, it is possible to have a vendor have multiple 1099 types as well. Not in the setup, but when you do the actual transaction. All right, so let's go back here. So this update here, this will go back if I forgot to make a vendor a 1099 vendor and I did it, let's say I did it in November, December. This is going to run back and say, okay, all the transactions that have been entered for the previous year are now going to become 1099 vendors. And you can do a range of vendors and things like that as well. There is also the ability to go through and take a update individual vendors and things like that as well. So you do have the ability to do that as well. So there are a couple different ways of viewing what the 1099s are going to be for individuals. One of the ways is by going in and running smart lists. There are also inquiry views on that. So if we go under our inquiry, there are vendor 1099 details here. So if I go through and pull up a vendor, I would see this vendor here is not a, this here is a 1099 vendor. If I choose that it is non-employee comp, all right, and I do the year, then I would be able to see the entire amount here that would be going into box 1 for the non-employee compensation there for that vendor. Right. I'm not going to go through and pull them all up, but you get the idea here. So you can see how much here individually. You could also go through and do the smart list, which would show you all that information there. And then there's also the ability under transactions here. If I go into edit 1099 transaction information, if I pull up a vendor, right? So this transaction here, all right, is set up to be a 1099 miscellaneous. If it was supposed to be a 1099 non-employee comp, then I could go through and mark that as a, I can change the tax type right here. And then I process this, and this will update that transaction from a MIS to an NEC type. Right. So again, there are multiple ways of going through and quote unquote fixing the information that's in the system there. So again, smart list to get you a list of all of them. You get your 1099 details to go through and look at it by vendor. And then if you need to go through and edit it, you can go through and edit the individual transactions using your edit 1099 transaction information window over here. Right, and that is going through page 38 there. It talks about the editing and everything like that. Okay. So a couple things to note here. If we go through and take a look at page 44 in the manual there, talks about where some of that information comes from and things like that. When you do print out your 1099s, so the payer's information comes from the company and address windows. The payer's federal ID number comes from on the 1099 entry window. Is where you'll be able to enter that. And then the recipient's information is going to come from the vendor maintenance window in that there. And then the account number is an optional field if you want to do that. And then the box information obviously is going to come from the actual transactions themselves. Right. There's some information there about mag media filing from Green Shades if you wanted to do that. Right. And then some questions here about year-end FAQs. The first one here, inactive vendor records. Are inactive vendor records cleared out during year-end closing? And no, they're not automatically removed. In order to remove them, basically you can't have any history information. You'd have to go through and remove the history for those. Again, nowadays, most people, unless you have a really large database, most companies are just leaving that information there so that they have the ability to go back and view that information at any point in time. Okay. Let's see here. Next thing there, payroll and fixed assets, we're going to skip right now. Again, we're going to come, we'll close off with the payroll and fixed assets. Again, if anybody needs to drop off, they can do that at that point in time. Right, so let's jump back over and see if there are any questions here on payables. Not seeing any questions here, so let's go ahead and fire up our next poll question. And our next poll question is, do you run payroll through Dynamics GP? So either yes or no, you can go ahead and submit that. All right, we've got most people here, but we're still missing a few. So again, if you need CPE, make sure that you are answering all of these poll questions. Got a few more here. We'll give it another 30 seconds and then we'll do our countdown. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll give them the the 10-second countdown here to make sure everybody has the ability to do that. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we're gonna go ahead and close that poll. And the grand majority of you do not run payroll through there. And that's kind of what I expected. So that's, again, one of the reasons why we're going to go through and do the payroll after the GL. So go ahead and close that poll. All right, let's see, go back and see if there's any questions out here. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to run through our general ledger year end. Again, payroll we're gonna hold off until payroll and fixed assets will hold off until after we do the GL. So we're gonna go ahead and do the GL next. But before we do that, we've been going for almost an hour and a half or so. So why don't we go ahead and we'll take a quick 10-minute break, and then we will come back in 10 minutes. So I've got 20 after 2, so we'll come back at 2:30 and pick up with the general ledger. So again, we'll see everybody in about 10 minutes or so. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started here in another minute or so. If everybody could just kind of raise your hands and let me know when you get back so that I know as soon as we have most people back, we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so about half of you back so far, so. Right. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and keep going. One thing I did forget to mention, we talked about it, and then I forgot to show was the um, closing of the sales taxes. So in the manual over on page 26 here, it talks about closing the sales tax periods for the year. So as I mentioned, sales tax is shared between sales and purchasing series. So you want to make sure that you only do this after you've closed out both of those different modules. And essentially what this will do is this just goes through and moves information from the current year to the prior year. So again, if you're not doing sales taxes at all, you're not tracking those in the system, this is not a process you need to go through. But for those of you who are, what you're going to do is you're going to go under your GP, tools, routines, company, tax year end close. All right. And then this would be your sales tax closing procedure here. So again, you can go ahead and get the report, mark the close year, go ahead and process that, and then that would go ahead and close out your sales tax information. Again, that's all really just going to move it from current year to prior year and zero out your current year so that you're tracking your current year sales tax correctly there. Again, not going to affect, if you don't do it, it's not going to affect anything in sales or purchasing modules. It's not going to affect the sales taxes calculations on those or anything like that. It's really just for reporting purposes to make sure everything falls through within the proper year. All right. So before we jump in, I know everybody's waiting. Everybody, GL is the big thing for everybody. So, but before we jump into that, I just want to go ahead and see if there are any questions on any of the other modules that we've gone through so far. So we've gone through our inventory. We've done our sales and our purchasing. We are going to next hit our general ledger. And then we will, after that, for those of you who are not doing fixed assets or payroll, you can go ahead and drop off if you want to, or if you would like to stay on. We'll do fixed assets first, and then we'll hit up payroll at the very end there. So, any questions on any of the modules so far? All right, not seeing any, we'll go ahead and continue on. If you want to go ahead and I'll put your hands down, that'd be great. All right, so let's go through and let's jump into the GL. So again, GL is really the really important module that must be closed out, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Let's see here. Okay. Um, so couple things to note with the general ledger year-end processing. All right. Again, you're going to want to go through and make sure that you have as many of your 2023 transactions in there as possible. So essentially, you're going to want to finish off your 2023 transactions. But some people think that they have to wait until they get their adjustments from their accountants and things like that to go out and go through and close the year. That's not the case. We usually suggest closing out the general ledger as close to the year end as possible. Sometimes people will do it mid-January or possibly even the end of January, but you want to go through and do that year end process sooner rather than later. You can, we'll show you in a moment here how we can go back and post prior year transactions and let the system go through and do its thing and update the beginning balances and everything like that. So it's not like once you've closed out the year, everything's shut down and you can't do anything else. So, it's important that you go through and do that year-end close. One of the main reasons for doing a year-end close is that if you do not do a year-end close, your beginning balances for your GL accounts do not update. So if you are utilizing, Management Reporter to get your financial statements out, you would not be able to run your balance sheets, correct balance sheet for 2024 until you do a year-end close, because those balance sheet balances are not going to update the beginning balances. So again, it is important that you go through and do that year-end close, especially prior to wanting to run any financials for 2024. All right, so let's go through and talk about the year-end close. And I'm actually for this module, I'm actually going to bring the manual over here so we can kind of talk about this and walk through it, and then we'll go through the individual steps. So again, summary steps. Step one here, you're going to want to make sure that you close all of the other modules prior to closing the GL. So you're going to make sure that you go through and close out all the other modules before you do your GL, including fixed assets and payroll and everything like that. Again, we're kind of going out of order here, but you're going to want to make sure you have all of your other modules closed out. Step two, post your final adjusting entries in general ledger. Now, when we say post adjusting final entries, they don't have to be the final entries. You may have some adjusting entries that you do after year end, in the beginning of January, middle of January or something like that. That's kind of what we're talking about. We're not talking about, your year end, your adjustments from your accountant. Those can be entered at a later point in time, and we'll talk about that. All right, step three here, we're going to want to print an account list to verify the posting type. Now, this is an extremely important thing, and I'll stress this again when we get to going through it in detail. But we have to make sure that we have the posting types correct on our accounts. Step four is going to be close the last period of the fiscal year. Step five is perform final maintenance on all the financial series. Step six is going to check the general ledger settings, and we'll talk about what that means in a moment there. We're going to make a backup. Again, we're big on making backups, so we're going to make a backup. Then we're going to print out the final detailed trial balance. Again, typically most people will do that to to a screen and then print it off to a PDF, to a file, so that they have it and saved. Quite often, a detailed trial balance can get very, very large, so it's probably not something you're going to want to print out on paper. But it is a good idea to print that out and save that to a hard drive and save it to a file. Step 9 is going to be print your final financial statements. Again, may not be your quote unquote final financial statements, but print out your financial statements there. Then we're going to go through and we're going to set up the new year in the fiscal period setup window. We'll set the date to 12/31. We're going to close out the year. 13 is going to be optional, closing the fiscal periods for all the series. Step 14, adjust any budget figures for the new year and print our financial statements, making sure that when we go through and print our financial statements that our balance sheet matches up to what we previously printed out there, and making sure that, if we haven't entered anything in for 2024, our income statement is all zeros. And then once we verified everything there, then we'll go ahead and make a backup. All right, so let's go through and look at these in detail here. So again, step 1 is going to be complete the posting and closing procedures in the other modules. Again, we're going to go through and do, inventory, receivables, payables, fixed assets, general ledger. Payroll are independent, and that's always at the calendar year end. But again, we're going to want to make sure we close out all of the individual modules before we get to our general ledger. Then we're going to go ahead and post any of our adjusting journal entries, or just our standard, any journal entries that, or any transactions that we have out there. We want to make sure that anything that came through any of the other modules has been posted, making sure that all that information there hits the proper year. Now, again, our note here, and this is in bold, you can post adjusting entries to the 2023 in the GL after closing the 2023 year. Most clients post these adjustments months after closing the year. You might not get your journal entries from your accountant until, March or April or something like that. Hopefully, they're a little quicker than that. But, it may be a couple months before you get all those. So go ahead and do your year-end close. And then once you get those, you can go ahead and post them as a historical transaction. It will go back, it'll affect the 2023, and it will automatically roll through to the beginning of 2024. So it's not like we have to go through and reopen the year, post those transactions, and then go through the whole year-end close again or anything like that. It's just, part of the GAP process, that once you've done your year-end close, anything you post to the previous year, again, there's a little caveat there. There's a little checkbox that we're going to talk about in our setup. But as long as you have that box marked, you can post to a historical year, and then the system will automatically carry those balances forward and update the beginning balances for the next year. All right. So again, it's not necessary to wait until you have your final adjustments. All right. Step 3, print account list to verify the posting type. All right. As I mentioned, this is one of the most extremely important things that you have to do. I'm going to move this aside here so we can talk about how we go through and do this. So in our financial series, let me go over into financial. When we go into set up our GL accounts, each GL account has a posting type here: balance sheet and profit and loss. As part of the year-end close, any account that is set up as a balance sheet, what the system will do, it will roll over the 12/31 balance, or whatever your fiscal year-end balance, whatever your fiscal year end is. It will roll over that ending balance into the beginning balance for the new year. Any account that is set up as a profit and loss or a P&L account, that will take that balance and close that into retained earnings and zero that out for the beginning as the beginning balance for the new year. So it is extremely important to make sure that our posting account types are set up properly. So you can go through and you could sit here and scroll through all your accounts and make sure they're all set up correctly. But that would be a tedious process. You could also run a smart list and just view all those all the accounts and do that way. There's a little bit easier way of doing it, and that is, again, dealing with smart list. So if we go into our smart list here and I go under financial, and we talk about this in our manual here, we go through and show you how to do this. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to go under our accounts, and I've already created these here. So I've got one here that says balance sheet account set up as income statement. So if I click on that, the goal here is not to see any accounts in here. All right. So what I've done is, if I go to my search, I said I want any account number that is less than 4,000, because I know 4,000 is my first P&L account number, that is set up as a posting type that is equal to profit and loss. So that's showing me that any account that should be set up as a balance sheet that is set up as a profit and loss, give me that information here. So I don't have any accounts set up incorrectly here in terms of anything that's less than 4,000. Okay, so hopefully everybody follows what I'm doing here. Now, obviously, you're gonna, my chart of account structure is set up as 342, and my natural account here is my second segment. So I know that this 4,000 is going to be my very first P&L account. You're going to want to make sure that you set it up the way your chart of account structure is set, and what your first P&L account should be. But essentially, you're going to want to say, show me anything where the value is less than my first P&L account that is actually set up as a profit and loss posting type. Right? So again, I don't have anything here that's that way. But if I go here to my income statements account set up as a balance sheet account, now you can see I have a whole bunch of accounts here. Now, some of these are going to be okay, and we'll talk about why. But you'll see here, I've got, project billings here. It's set up as a 4,200 account that is set up as a balance sheet. That would be a no-no. Okay. This is supposed to be a P&L account, and it's set up as a balance sheet account. So if I were to leave this way and run my year-end close, all this would do would for this account here, this would roll over this account balance into my next year. Okay, and that's not what I want to have. I want it to go through and clear out and roll into my retained earnings. So to fix this, what I would do is, in my case here, I can just double click on that account, go into my posting type here, mark that as a profit and loss, hit save, go into my next one here, because this is my unbilled project revenue, which should also be a P&L account. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. I'm going to refresh my report here. I've got another one here, my purchase price variance account. That one should also be a P&L. And it looks like my withholding offset here should also be a P&L. And wow, I've got a couple others here. I've got, I've got my overhead account here, which should be set up as a profit and loss, and refresh. So now I've got, it says rent expense here, but if I look at this here, my account type, it's an allocation account. So allocation accounts never have any balances in them. So it doesn't matter what account type the allocation accounts are set up as. Now, I do have a couple of other ones here that are set up as posting accounts, and all of these here are set up as balance sheet accounts. So I would want to go through and fix all of these other accounts here as well. Then I come down here to my unit accounts. Now, unit accounts, again, it does not matter whether they're set up, they're going to be set up as balance sheet accounts, and it doesn't really matter what the number is there. So, your allocation accounts and your unit accounts are fine, but anything that's set up as a posting account, you're going to want to make sure those are correctly set up either as balance sheet or income statements, because those are the ones that are going to be either rolled over or closed in, merged into your retained earnings. Okay, so again, if I go over here to my search, in this case here, I've said 399999 should be my last balance sheet account. So I want anything that's greater than that, that is set up as a balance sheet account. That's why I'm getting these accounts over here. All right. Again, if you look in the manual, I'll just drag the manual back across here so we can take a look at this. In the manual, we talk about this, setting these up here. Setting up the posting type is equal to profit and loss, and the main account segment is less than 4,000. Now, in the manual here, we use just the main account segment. In my example there, I used the whole account. You can do it either way. It doesn't really matter there. Also, one of the other things in here, in the manual, we don't mention about bringing out the account type. I would suggest bringing that out into the smart list here, just so you know, if you're looking at these other accounts here, you can see that they are unit accounts and not have to worry about those. And the same with the posting and allocation accounts there. All right. So again, we want to make sure that the accounts are set up correctly. Once we are confirmed that we have all of our accounts set up the correct way, then we can go on to step 4. All right. So step 4 would be to close the last period of the fiscal year. Again, this is another optional type thing here, where we're going to go under setup, company, fiscal periods, and close out the fiscal period there. Again, some people don't do that until after they've done the final year-end close procedure and things like that. But it's up to you guys. And some people never even do that at all. Again, that's an optional function there. All right. Step 5 is perform file maintenance. Now, again, this is something that may take a while. And this is why, it's suggested that, the year-end procedures be done kind of after the fact, after, people are out, people are done. Oh, one thing I did mention is when you are doing, wow, and I can't believe I forgot to mention this. As you're going through and doing these, you're going to want to make sure everyone is out of the system. Okay, you're going to want to make sure you are the only one in GP doing these year-end processes. Now, one of the things that has changed for 2020 with version 18.6 is they only need to be out of the current company that you are processing. So what that means, if you have 2 or 3 GP companies set up and you're doing year-end maintenance, you just have to make sure that everybody is out of the company that you're currently in. They could be doing things in the other companies, but again, it's suggested that everybody's out. Again, really, our suggestion is really to have everybody out of the system. But we know that that's not always possible. You may need to have people doing things in other entities, but again, you need to have everybody out of the entity that you are currently in. So going back again, I apologize, I got off on a tangent there, but step 5, perform the maintenance. So we're going to go under GP, maintenance, check links, and we're going to choose our financial series here. And what you're going to do is you're just going to hit all, and that's going to go ahead and put the all those tables over here. Now, check links is something that Some companies do on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, semi-annual basis, things like that. Just like that reconcile for inventory. It's something that you should be doing every now and then. What it does is it will go through and it will compare the summary information with the detail information that it has, and it'll match that information up, and then it'll give you out a report for any discrepancies or anything like that. Now, how long this check links takes really depends on the amount of transactions that you have in your system. So if you've got a lot of transactions in there, it could take quite some time to run a check links. Mine is pretty quick. I don't have a ton of transactions in there. I'm not going to run it just for time's sake, though. But just know that it could take a while to do that. Now, when I went under discard that. When I went under maintenance over here, you'll see that there are a couple of other options under here. Please do not choose clear data. Okay. You do not want to go through and delete data. What you want to do is you run the check links. Okay. So check links is the utility here that you want to run. You can run it for all the different series if you want, but it's really important to run it for the financial series here, especially at year end, just to make sure that all the numbers are falling through correctly there. All right, so once we've done the file maintenance, the next thing is that we want to check and make sure how our general ledger setup is set up. Yeah, general ledger setup is set up. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go under our GP tools, setup financial general ledger. All right. And what we're going to be concentrating on here are a couple of things. One here is our retained earnings. We're going to get another option to take a look at this, but when we actually do the year-end close. But for right now, we want to kind of make sure that this is correct here. So again, our retained earnings, we want to make sure that is that account is set up to the correct year-end, to the correct retained earnings account. Wow. Now, there is an option here to close to divisional account segments. What that means is if you have your chart of accounts set up where there are multiple entities within one company, then you're going to want to close the divisional account segments. So what that would allow you to do is say, okay, which one of my segments here is for my company? And then that would go through and it would close out each company into its own retained earnings. For the grand majority of you out there, you're not going to be doing that. You're just going to have one retained earnings account that you're closing out to. All right. The next area that we want to concentrate on is this information right here. First off, our maintaining history. We want to make sure we're maintaining history for our accounts and our transactions. Again, if we're not maintaining the history for these, then we're not going to be able to go back and do inquiries or run reports. So again, we want to make sure that we are maintaining the history for that. And then also over here under our allow. Most of you probably for this posting to history, this is probably unmarked, okay? Because you don't want people to go in and mistakenly post to history. But this is the checkbox here that will allow people to go back and post to a historical year. So again, 99% of the time, this is probably going to be unmarked so that people are not incorrectly entering in the wrong year. But if you now, let's fast forward now, let's say you've closed the year and it's now March, and you've gotten your adjusting entries from your accountant, or even February or whatever like that. You've gotten your adjusting your entries from your accountant. So now you want to go back and you want to enter in those adjusting entries as of 12/31/2023. In order to do that, you have to have this box right here marked allow posting to history. So at that point in time, you would come back into this window. Again, the way we got into this window here was we went under GP, Tools, Setup, Financial, General Ledger. You would then mark that allow posting to history, hit OK, go through, make your journal entries. Again, the system will automatically roll forward those beginning balances for you, close out the any of the accounts that hit the P&L, close those into retained earnings, handle all that for you as soon as you post the transaction. After you've posted that transaction, then you're going to want to again come back into that same window. So again, Tools, Setup, Financial, General Ledger. And then you're going to go ahead and unmark that box again to make sure that nobody is, again, posting to that historical year. Okay, so again, most times this is going to be unmarked here. Only time you want to have that box marked there is if you want to go back and post transactions to a historical year. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK there. All right, so that's what we talk about when we say check the general ledger settings. It's really the main things there are the retained earnings account and making sure that we are tracking our history for accounts and transactions. All right, step 7 is going to be make another backup. Print 8 or step 8 would be printing out a detailed trial balance. Again, what you're probably going to want to do for that is you're probably going to want to print that out to the screen and then print it as a PDF from your screen. I would not suggest printing that out to paper. It's probably going to, probably going to be, multiple hundreds, if not thousands of pages long. So that would, be a lot, a lot of paper there. So again, print it out to the screen, and then from the screen, go ahead and print it to a PDF and save that off as part of your permanent records. After we print the detailed trial balance, we're going to go ahead and print out our financial statements. Our balance sheets, our P&Ls, statement of cash flows, statement of retained earnings, whatever it is that you're printing out for our not-for-profit individuals there. Statement of revenue and expenditures, any additional reports or anything like that that you wanted to go ahead and print out. Again, these are going to be you're going to be able to go back and print them out at any point in time, but these are just going to be used to compare to what you're getting out after you do your year-end close, just to make sure everything came through correctly. All right. Once we've printed our financial statements, then we're going to go ahead and set up the new fiscal year. So setting up a new fiscal year is pretty easy. In fact, if you've prior to doing your year-end close, you may have already set up that new fiscal year because many of you, may post future transactions and things like that. So your new year may already be set up, but if not, you're going to want to go to our GP, Tools, Setup, Company, Fiscal Periods. And then over here, in your case here, if we're in 2023, it would be 2024. We would have our first day and our last day. Whatever, if you're on a calendar year, 1/1 to 12/31. If you're on a fiscal year, it would be your first fiscal period to your first day of your fiscal period to the last day of your fiscal period. Then we would enter in our number of periods, hit calculate, and it will fill in for us. So let me show you how this works. So I've got all the way up through 2028 already done for me. So I'll go ahead and show you, I'll do 2029. All right, so here my first day is going to be 1/1/2029. Last day is 12/31/2029. I have my number of periods set as 12. So when I hit calculate, the system then goes ahead and says, okay, period 1 is this, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. Now, also remember, you can go through and you can change these period names here. So instead of saying period 1, if you want that to be January, February, and you could spell these out if you wanted to, and so on and so forth. But again, remember, you can go through and change those names. Once you have all that set up, go ahead and hit OK. And that's all there is to setting up a new year. Okay, so it's not a big deal. You can very easily go through and set up that new year. All right. The next thing here is going to be going through changing our date here, setting that back to 12/31/2023. And before we do the actual year-end close, let me just go see if there's any questions here. All right, so there's some questions here. Can clear data be locked? You can set up security so that people don't have access to those utilities and things like that. So yes. There's another question here about check links. Okay, they said they've never done check links before. Are they doing something wrong? No, it's not something that has to be done. It's one of those highly suggested things that you do. So if you've never done it before, it's not that you're doing anything quote unquote wrong. It's just something that it's suggested you do periodically. If you call into our support desk, they may have you do it. If you've run into any issues where summary and detailed balances aren't matching up, they may actually ask you to run it. But again, yeah, it's not something that absolutely has to be done. It's just something that's strongly recommended. And then question here, can posting the history be enabled later? Okay, so again, the question was, does the choice to allow posting to history, does that have to be made during the year-end close? No, that can be made. You can go in at any point in time and mark and unmark that box. So that is not actually part of the the closing process or anything like that. It's under the setup window. So again, you can come in here and mark and unmark that box at any point in time. Okay. So again, it would be something that you would you can go through and a couple months down the road go through and mark that. And in fact, what you may find is that you're in the you've already done the year-end close, and now you're towards the middle or end of January, and you get a transaction in that was dated last year. Well, you have a choice. You can either put that in 2024, or you could go back, mark that box, allow the transaction to be posted to the previous year. It would again roll forward and hit the update the beginning balances and stuff like that, and then you could go back and unmark that box again to not allow it. So that checkbox can be marked and unmarked at any point in time. Okay. Question about, will we make this recording available? Yes, we'll be posting this up on our YouTube page. So it will be available up on our YouTube page probably within the next few days. It'll take a little bit for Jason to edit it and get it up on there. So yes, it will be available up on our YouTube page. And I'm pretty sure Jason will send out a information on, when that's posted. All right. Any other questions here before we go through and do the actual year end? So, all right, not seeing any. Oh, wait a minute. So periods are closed. It doesn't matter that posting to history is checked. So there's a question here. If the periods are closed in the fiscal year screen, does it matter if that posting to history is checked? Yes, it does. So if you have that posting to history checked, then then you can still go back and post to a historical year. If you don't have that box marked, then you will not be able to post to the historical year at all. All right, so we are now up to step 12, which is actual closing of the fiscal year. So this is the important part here. Again, leading up to this is very important stuff. But this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we're actually going to go through and do that year-end close. So again, we're going to go under our GP tools, routines, financial, year-end closing. Right? Or if we go under our navigation pane over here, under our financial, routines, year-end closing. All right, so we pull up our year-end closing window. The first thing here is it's asking us for our retained earnings account. Again, we just verified that account over in our GL setup, but we want to make sure, again, we're verifying that one more time here just to make sure that it's correct. The next thing here is our starting journal entry. Again, this is a systematically assigned number. This would be the next journal entry number in your sequence for your company. My suggestion is just let the system do what it wants to do. I do see some people would go in and put in, like 2024-01 or 2024-0001 or something like that. To me, that's not necessary at all. Just leave the starting journal entry to be what it's going to be. Let the system do what it wants to do. Just let it roll forward the next number there. Okay. So again, it's and our year is going to be 2024. All right. Then we have some other options here. Remove unused segment numbers and maintain inactive accounts. All right. So over on the bottom of 61 and the top of 62 here, it talks about what those checkbox means. All right. So if we mark that remove unused segment numbers, what that will do is, so, again, GP is set up with segments to the chart of account structure. There may be new numbers in one of those segments that have never been used, but we set them up for some reason. You can go ahead and remove those unused segment numbers here by marking this box. And as part of the year-end closing, it will go through and remove those. But if those numbers have ever been used anywhere in the system, if there's ever been a journal entry used against it, if it's ever been put on a posting account, an allocation account or anything like that, it will not be removed. So again, my suggestion is just leave it alone. Space is cheap now on hard disks and stuff like that. Again, if you have a really large account structure and a lot of accounts, and you're looking to clean up some things, then yeah, that might be something that you might want to do. But again, it's not something that most people will end up doing. The final one there is maintain inactive accounts. So in our GL, so if I come back over here to cards account, and I pull up a GL account, there's a box over here called inactive. Okay, so if we mark this box as inactive, if we mark an account as inactive, as part of the year-end closing process, if that account has no balance, okay, if that account is marked as inactive and it has no balance, it will be removed. If you don't want that account to be removed, then you can go ahead and check this box here and say, I want to keep my inactive accounts that either have budget amounts, or I just want to keep all my inactive accounts. Okay. Now, again, most times people will just go ahead and keep their inactive accounts, even if they have zero balances. Again, if it's ever been used, it's not going to be removed because, again, it's going to be needed for historical purposes and stuff like that. But it's just, if it's never been used and has zero balance in it, then it will be removed. Otherwise, it will go ahead and be removed from the system. You can just go ahead and say, just maintain them and just leave them all. It's, that's a preference within your organization, how you want to handle that. All right. Once you've made your selection, once you've checked to make sure that your retained earnings account is set up correctly, again, you can just do the lookup here, make sure that's set to the retained earnings account. You've marked the boxes as appropriate. You would go ahead and hit close year. Now, again, I'm not going to do this because it's going to, my system's not going to take that long, but again, just for time purposes, close year. Couple notes on this. When you hit the close year, you're going to see a progress bar going across the screen. That progress bar may stall out at various times during the thing, and it may look like it's not doing anything. It probably still is behind the scenes. Again, depending on the amount of transactions that you have in any given year, it may take quite some time to go through and do a year-end close. I've seen, some of our clients, it takes, almost a full day to go through and do year-end close because they have so many transactions hitting their GL. And so many different GL accounts and stuff like that. So, if it pauses, don't think that it's, hung, and try and close GP and everything like that. Let it go, let it do its thing. If it's the first time you've ever done a year-end close, you probably don't know how long it's going to take. But if you've done year-end closes in the past, you'll probably have a halfway decent idea. Okay, in the past it's taken, an hour or a half hour or whatever like that. If it's only taken an hour in the past and now you're up to 3 hours, well, maybe then that might be time for a support call or something may be going on there. But again, even though it doesn't look like it's doing anything, it's very likely that it is. So please don't just close out of GP and reboot or anything like that, because the last thing we want to do is stop the year-end process in the middle, because that can really mess up things. And again, that's why we always strongly recommend having that backup prior to going through and doing this year-end close process. All right. Once the year-end close is done, you will get a report out that will show you, the balance sheet accounts moving over to the beginning balance for the next year, and all of your P&L accounts being closed out into the retained earnings. So you will get a report out at the end there. All right. It's also important to note that once you get that report, please print that report out. Either print it out to a hard paper, print it out as a hard copy, or more likely print it out and save it off as a PDF. that's your only chance to there's no way to reprint that year-end closing report. So make sure you do print that report and save it. Again, either hard copy or, more than likely save it off to a disk or save it off to a file. I'm sorry. All right. So again, once you've done that, once the year-end close is done, then you could go back and go back into your fiscal periods and close off all those, do a mass close here and close off everything if you wanted to close off the entire year or whatever like that. All right. The other thing that you can do then is once you've done the year-end close, you could go through and update your budget amounts. So whether you're doing budgets in GP or whether you're doing them through the budget wizard for Excel, then you can go through and update those budget reports and stuff like that. Once you've finished everything, you're also going to want to print out your financial statements again, compare those to what you printed out prior to the close, make sure that those numbers are correct there. Once you've done that, then go ahead and make another final backup so that you have a good backup after everything is done. As you noted on the year-end close, or you may have seen it here, there is a button here called Reverse Historical Year. All right, that has been added. That was added to GP. Yeah, I don't know, remember how many releases ago, but it's been in there for quite some time now. What that will do is that will actually go and it will reverse out the year and make it it'll take it from a historical year to a current year or an open year. Okay, so if you close the year and you realize, oh, I've got so many different transactions, or I messed something up or something like that, you can go back and reverse the year. If you're going to do that, please make sure you do a backup before you do that, and a backup after you do that. Reversing the year is not quite as clean as closing a year. We've had some people, or we've had a handful of people do that with success. So it can be done, but it's one of those things that really shouldn't be done unless it's absolutely necessary. Right. What you also have to remember is that if we go through and we've already closed 2023, and let's say for some reason you needed to reopen 2022, well, you can't just go through and say reverse historical year 2022. You would have to reverse 2023. And then once you reverse 23, then you would reverse 2022. So it's going to go backwards in sequence here. So again, it's going to tell you, when you reverse a historical year here, it's going to tell you your year to open would be 2023. And then once you've done that, then it would say year to open 2022, and so on and so forth. So it is possible to reopen multiple previous years, but they have to be done one at a time. And again, if you're going to do that, please make a backup in between each one so that you have a good backup, a good clean backup before you do the next previous year. Okay, so again, making sure that those are closed out there. All right. So let me go back over here and see. All right. There's a question here about looking at the process monitor. So in the manual, it talks about if you think that the system is hung, take a look at the process monitor. So over under Dynamics GP, there is a process monitor right here. If you open this up, this will tell you if there's any processes running in the background. Okay. So this will tell you whether or not, it won't tell you definitely whether things are hung, but it will tell you, it'll give you a much better idea as to whether the year end is still happening, or if it is hung. So again, that's how you get to that process monitor. It's just Dynamics GP process monitor. So this will tell you kind of what's going on behind the scenes, either at the on your local machine, on a remote machine, or if you're using the process server functionality of GP there. Okay. Other questions about the closing out the general ledger? In the manual there, we do go through and talk about, what happens if you don't correct all of your accounts. If you close some out that are set up as the wrong posting account and stuff like that. It's probably best if you do that to end up, giving our support desk a call and we can help you out there. All right. See if there are any other questions out there. All right. Let me go through and there's a question here. Is the support desk available the week of Christmas? Yes, we will be working and the support desk will be open. Okay. So let me go ahead and fire off our next poll here. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to launch the next two polls. So we'll do one at a time here, but so we'll go ahead and launch poll number 5 here. So we at PTC, we send out, a quarterly newsletter, and we want to make sure that everybody is receiving that. So, let us know if you're receiving it. So yes or no. If you're not receiving it and you do want to receive it, go ahead and mark that bottom one there, and we'll make sure we get you on the list. So if everybody could go ahead and respond to that. Okay. In that quarterly newsletter, we go over, some things about GP. We'll throw in some other things about some other technology. We may have something from our IT department if there's an update for Windows or networking or something like that. So it's not only GP related, but it's heavily skewed towards GP. So again, looks like most people have responded. So we'll go ahead and we'll give the 10-second countdown here. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so we'll go ahead and we will close off that poll. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this last poll because I know some of you may end up dropping off if you're not interested in fixed assets and payroll. So I'll go ahead and just please rate this session, either from not what I expected or great. and go ahead and submit that. And after that, again, if there's any questions on any of the other modules that we've gone through, please let me know. Otherwise, if you're not interested in fixed assets or payroll, you feel free to drop off. You know, you're more than welcome to hang on if you want. But I know, you know, it's a busy time of the year, and you know, if you're not using those two modules, you may not be all that interested in hanging around. So again, we'll go ahead and give the countdown here. Let's go through and do 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you. Go ahead and close that poll. All right, so again, last chance if anybody has any questions on the session here, anything before we move on? All right, thank you for the feedback there, appreciate it. There's a question about the YouTube page. It's just it's Paradigm Technology Consulting. If you just do a search on there. But again, I'll make sure Jason sends out a link for that as well. All right. So again, thank you for everybody who is going to drop off from that now. We will now continue on to our fixed assets. So again, we're going to kind of jump back in the manual here. So let's go back to fixed assets. Which is around page 52. And so we're going to go through the fixed assets management closing process. Again, we're going to want to make sure we do this before we do the GL. You know, so I know I'm doing it kind of out of sequence here, but you know, I just didn't want to hold up everybody else if they're not interested in fixed assets, and according to the responses, there weren't that many people who were doing fixed assets in GP. So again, closing the fiscal year in fixed assets needs to be done at the end of the year, preferably on the last day, or at least as close as possible. All right. Again, there are year-to-date buckets for fixed assets. It's not solely date sensitive like AP and AR are. So again, we're going to want to make sure we close out these as close to the year end as possible. Especially, we have some clients who actually do daily depreciation. So it's really important for those folks to make sure they close it out, to make sure their year-to-date balances are correct. So we're going to want to make sure that we do that as close to the year end as possible. So our detailed steps, we're going to want to make sure that we enter all the activity for the current fiscal year. All activity means asset additions, changes, transfers, retirements. So any changes that you have to fixed assets. So if we're going to go through, if we have any assets to add, if we're going to make any changes to them, move them from location to location, change any of the depreciation methods or anything like that on any of them. If we're going to do any retirements, we want to make sure we get all those transactions done prior to doing our year-end close. Right. The second part of that is going to be making sure that we do our depreciation. So we're going to want to go through and run our depreciation through the last day of the year. So again, we're going to want to depreciate all of our assets through the last end of the year, and we're going to want to do it for all of our books there. Okay. Once we process that depreciation, we're going to then, because that's going to create the transaction over in the GL, we're going to want to make sure we go over into the GL and post that depreciation. So step 2 would be processing the asset depreciation for the through the end of the year, and step 3 would be posting the depreciation to the GL. All right. Step 3 is posting it to the GL. Step 4 is posting it to the posting the GL batch. Okay, so again, the two processes there: the depreciation, the GL posting it over to the GL, and then going into the GL and actually posting the depreciation within the GL. All right. Step 5 is we're going to want to print out all of our fixed asset reports. So if we go under our reports, here we have our fixed assets. So we're going to want to print out our year-to-date depreciation reports, any activity reports that we have in here. So our annual activity showing, our anything we've acquired, anything we've retired, anything we've transferred, all those different types of things there. So we're going to want to run our annual activity reports as well. And then any other reports that your organization feels are necessary there. After we run our reports and we can do our backup, again, we're going to come down and set our date to be 12/31/2023. And then we're going to go through and we're going to close our asset books. So to do that, we're going to go under our routines, fixed assets, year end. We're going to go ahead and we're going to choose which books we want. If we're going to do all of them, we're going to go ahead and hit all. Once our books are chosen here, then we go ahead and hit continue. It will tell you what year you're actually closing over here. So in my case here, again, I'm using sample data. So, if I was to close this, I would be closing my 2027 year. And then go ahead and hit continue. And that would go ahead and close off those books. Now, what happens is when that runs is if you look over on page 54 of your manual there, it kind of tells you what happens. So the on your asset book windows, there are a couple fields there. The cost basis goes to the beginning cost, the life to date depreciation becomes the beginning reserve, and then the salvage becomes the beginning salvage. Right? On the asset general information, the quantity moves over to the beginning quantity field as well. All right. So it moves all the year-to-date depreciation. It zeroes out all the year-to-date depreciation amounts, and then it also moves that information there as well. Now, step 9 here is another optional. That is to summarize your financial data. So here under financial routines, fixed assets, summarize financial here. All right. Again, this is an optional thing, not a suggested thing, because once you summarize it, you cannot go back to the detail. Right. So again, most companies are not going to elect to do that. But if you have, we have some clients who have, hundreds of thousands of assets. They will go through and they will summarize financial information for a couple of years ago. You can go through and choose what period and stuff like that you want it to summarize. So they may go back and they may summarize a couple of years ago at a time. But for, again, the grand majority of the clients are not going to be going through and summarizing that information. Again, because once you summarize it, you cannot get back to the detail. All right. Step 10 is another optional step there, which is to delete the asset information, the inactive asset information. All right. So again, under routines, fixed assets purge, we have the ability here to purge assets with a status of retired, deleted, partial, and open. And then we can say we want to purge information prior to a certain date. So again, if I'm at 12/20/23, I may say, okay, I can purge information from 5 years ago. So I may go in and I may purge 12/31/2018 or something like that. Okay, if I've kept the information around that long. This is, again, an optional step. It's not something that needs to be done. In fact, it's, not really it's not a strongly recommended thing or anything like that. So again, you can go through and purge that information, or you can just leave it there for in historical purposes, just in case you need it for inquiry or anything like that. All right. So that takes us through our fixed assets. So let me jump back over here, see if there's any questions here. Any questions on fixed assets? All right, not seeing anything on fixed assets there. Again, our next thing is going to be payroll. So if you're not running payroll through GP, and you want to jump off, again, I appreciate the time. And we will then continue along with our payroll. All right. So payroll procedures. So again, we're kind of doing this a little bit out of order, but we're going to go back up to page 47 in our manual and our payroll procedures. So there are two checklists. One is if we need to process 2024 pay runs before printing our year-end statements. And then there's also the payroll year-end closing checklist. Okay. So a couple notes there. For 2023, we haven't seen any W-2 or W-3 changes or electronic filing changes. None were noted from the IRS there, or none noted from Microsoft that were passed through to GP. There is some information in here from last year about COVID and the Family First Coronavirus Response Activity Response Act. So if you want, you can go ahead and read up on that if you need to. Hopefully you've taken care of that and don't need to do anything for there. All right, so the first thing here we're going to do is we're going to get into our checklist for processing 2024 pay runs before printing our 2023 year-end statements. All right, so again, many of you who are running payroll, if you're running weekly payroll, you're probably going to need to run payroll for 2024 before you get around to printing out your W-2s and W-3s and everything like that. All right, so that's what this process here talks about. You do not need to go through this if you are going to be able to run your W-2s and W-3s before you run any 2024 payrolls. So if you're on a monthly payroll cycle or something like that, then you may not need to do all these steps here. But again, the grand majority of people do need to run 2024 payroll prior to printing out their W-2s and W-3s. All right. So the first thing here is complete all the 2023 pay runs. In fact, let me just bring this over here so we can look at this as we go through here. So verify the version. Again, you're going to need that for when we go through and upload the tax information. But we're going to complete all of our 2023 pay runs. Then we're going to complete all the payroll month, period, and quarter end procedures. Okay. So we can reprint those even after the closing of the year. But again, it's best to go through and complete all the procedures before we do this. Once we do that, we're going to make a backup title, pre-2023 year-end wage file backup. And then we're going to install the 2023 year-end update. Now, when we say the 2023 year-end update, that's actually there's two things here. This piece here actually does not have to be done. All right. So we don't have to run the year-end update. What we do have to do is we do have to make sure we update the text tables. So, this piece here, if we did the update, that would take us up to the latest release of GP. Some people are not on that very last release of GP, or don't want to be on that last release of GP, so they may not install that update. All right. Once we do that, we want to go through and we want to create the year-end wage file. To do that, we're going to go through GP, Tools, Routines, Year-End Closing, and create the year-end wage file. All right. Now, note, the 2024 tax tables can be installed anytime after you created the year-end wage file. Right? So we don't want to do the tax tables until we've created this year-end wage file. And what this year-end wage file is going to be used for is what is going to be used to print out the W-2s and W-3s. Okay. So this here is really the most important step in here. So we go through and we create, that and updating the tax tables. So we want to go through and we want to create that year-end wage file. So again, slide this over here. So we're going to go under, if we go under our HR and payroll, and we go to our routines, okay? Here is our year-end wage report. It's going to ask us what year we're running. I don't really have payroll running in here, so it's not showing me my year. But you would be able to select your year in here, and then select whether it's your regularly or your qualified government employees. 99% of you guys are going to be 99.9% are going to be on the regular side there. So do that. And then how do you want that ordered? Do you want it by employee ID, by employee name, by department and name, or by employee social number, so employee social security number? All right. So again, we're going to choose the year, regular, how you wanted some sorted. And then here we can either do all or from. Obviously, because we're doing a year-end wage report, we're going to want to do all. All right. Once we've created that file, again, I can't do it because I don't have the year here, but you would have the ability to mark that box there and say that you were creating or processing the year-end file. This should say process over here. You would hit process, and then it'll create that year-end file. Right? You're going to want to make sure you know where that is saved on there so that you can go back and get that information. All right. Once we've created that year-end wage file, then we're going to make another backup that says post 2023 year-end wage table. Right. From there, we could go through and we could view the W-2 information, stuff like that, or at that point we don't need to do that. We could maybe do that at a later point in time or whatever like that. Because we can print out the W-2s once we've created the wage report, we can then go back and print the W-2s and stuff at a later point in time. right? From there, we're going to go in and do our text table update. So we would run our get our text table update, run that through, and then we would be able to go through and start printing out our 2024 checks. All right. So again, it's the year-end wage report. That is the that, and then the 2024 text table updates. At that point, like I said, then you're ready to run your 2024 payroll. Once you're ready to come back and do your W-2s, we can come in here, edit our W-2 information, take a look. We could print out all of our W-2 information for the employees, make sure all the amounts are correct. Then we could go through and print out the W-2s, print out the 1099-Rs or whatever that we needed to do, and then do our electronic filing if we needed to here as well. And that would be our year-end process. So there's no, so in here we have our year-end closing. This is where we're going to go through and create the year-end wage file for whatever year. I'm sorry, I messed this up before. This is our report. This is where we're going through and we're actually creating the year-end closing. So from here, I'm doing a year-end wage close for 2023. If I go ahead and process this, right? In my case here, again, I don't have all the setup and everything like that, so I can't complete it. Once I process that, then I can come in here, choose my year that I process that year-end closing for, and then print out that file that was based upon the year-end closing there. So for some reason, I completely missed that step there. But it's the same thing here. We just go through and we run our year-end close, which is the creates the year-end wage file, and then we go ahead and we print out that wage report that we go ahead and save off to the system. Okay. All right. So again, go back in over here and see if there's any questions. We get a backup before this close and then again after the close. Yes, so we will go through and we would make a close. We do a close before the year-end closing report and then after the year-end closing report. Okay, so there's backups along the way there. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.